You. There! A third-rate medical school graduate is not what we need. Your offer has been withdrawn. His harsh remarks reverberated in the still orientation room. Naturally, everyone's eyes shifted to me because he was pointing right at me. I had to listen because I was a new employee and couldn't react right away. Leave this place. Get this person out, security. A security guard came running toward me at that signal. But before he could get to me, I shifted. This place is getting to me. I quickly came to that conclusion and answered understood as gently as I could. Then I'm going to go now. I hurried to get out, but the guard grabbed me by the arm. Soon after, he yanked me violently to the door and pushed me out, causing me to land hard on my ass. Now go home. The security man pivoted on his heel and strode off. I was stunned as I sat there. A man who appeared to be in his 60s suddenly reached out to me and inquired, "Are you okay?" I had no idea at the time how drastically this experience would alter both my life and the lives of others. Andrew Carter is my name. I have been putting in a lot of effort in my quest to become a pediatric surgery specialist. Today was the first day of my long-awaited job after I was able to obtain an offer from a renowned general hospital. It has been quite difficult for me to get to this stage. Realizing I had finally become a doctor, I was overcome with emotion as I arrived at the location and saw the big sign that said General Hospital Orientation. However, I resisted tears that threatened to fall. This is only the start. Although it is the beginning, the orientation is not the end. After getting myself together, I went through the building's entrance and finished the check-in procedure. I was a little delighted as I saw the anxious faces making their way to the main hall, because I knew that these people would soon be my co-workers. I saw a small group of people gathered around someone as I made my way to the lobby. I glanced over casually as I passed, assuming it was just a group of students. However, I froze in place as soon as I saw the person at the middle. I recognized the man in the center who was laughing so loudly that it filled the lobby. Why is he here? My fists clenched in rage. He was the one person I could never forgive. His name was Richard Goodman, a man I would never forget. The worst man I've ever known. I have a brother, Ethan, who is 5 years younger than me. When I was in 8th grade and Ethan was in 3rd, he was in a terrible car accident during summer break, which left him paralyzed on his left side due to a spinal cord injury. Ethan was talented in sports, especially soccer, and he practiced diligently, often saying, "My dream is to become a professional soccer player." I wholeheartedly supported him. And the person who stole Ethan's dream was none other than Richard, the man now standing before me, laughing loudly. Richard noticed my glare. When our eyes met, he widened his eyes for a moment, seemingly surprised. Then, for some reason, he flashed a sly smile, as if he had spotted prime prey during a hunt, and started walking toward me. Even as he smiled, his gaze showed his disdain, as though he found my presence at this prestigious place offensive. Just as Richard opened his mouth to speak, the host's voice cut through the air. "The orientation will begin in 5 minutes. New hires, please proceed to the hall and take your seats." We both froze, remembering where we were. Could this man really be connected to this hospital? A wave of disgust washed over me. Richard shot me a final derisive glance before disappearing into the entrance ahead. My mind was in chaos. No way. This can't be real. Please let this be a bad dream. I thought to stay calm as I took my seat. The host stepped up to the podium and began the orientation right on time. After the opening remarks, a stout man with a thick mustache walked onto the stage. First, I have an announcement. Starting this April, our new director is George Goodman. The introduction began, but the moment I heard the name and saw his face, my entire body froze. Thank you for the introduction. I'm George Goodman. George began his self-introduction and spoke about his role as the new director. But none of it registered in my mind. I was completely absorbed in my own thoughts. And it was no wonder. George was Richard's father, the man who covered up his son's crime as the perpetrator of Ethan's accident. My parents divorced before Ethan was born, and I never knew my father. My mother raised us alone, but after giving birth, her health deteriorated, and she passed away quickly. We had no other relatives, so Ethan and I grew up together in the same foster home. The staff there were wonderful people. I had always dreamed of taking Ethan with me and leaving the foster home once I was able to work, so that we could live together as brothers. But during my 8th grade summer break, after playing soccer with Ethan at the park and heading back to the foster home, Ethan walked ahead of me, crossing the street at a green light. Out of nowhere, a reckless motorcycle ran the red light at terrifying speed and slammed into him. The bike was carrying 2 riders without helmets, weaving dangerously as it sped. Ethan was thrown into the air and hit the ground with a sickening thud. "Ethan!" I rushed toward him, but he was bleeding heavily and barely conscious. "I'll call an ambulance right now." Since the foster home was nearby, I ran back to explain the situation to one of the staff and then hurried back to Ethan's side. The staff member called the police and emergency services, and Ethan was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. But despite the doctor's desperate efforts, he had suffered a spinal cord injury. Although his life was saved, he was left paralyzed on his left side. Right after the accident, one of the bikers finally stopped, looked back at us, and shouted, "Crap! Let's get out of here," before speeding off. I'll never forget that moment. That guy was none other than Richard. Because he wasn't wearing a helmet, I could see his face clearly, and his cocky expression was burned into my memory. Despite the chaos, I managed to memorize the license plate number of the bike. While Ethan was fighting for his life in the ICU, I went to the police station with the foster home staff to report the details of the accident. The police quickly traced the bike and found out it belonged to Richard. However, instead of apologizing, Richard's father, George, somehow made the entire accident disappear. My testimony was dismissed as a misunderstanding due to a lack of security cameras or other witnesses. No, that bike was parked near the scene. You probably just assumed it was the offender's bike. After all, he wasn't involved in any crash, so you must be mistaken about that plate number. They made it seem like I was mistaken, and Richard was never held accountable. I'm begging you, please investigate the accident properly. I didn't get the license plate wrong. In that photo, it's him riding the bike. Look, I get it, but you grew up in a foster home and probably need money. Listen, the investigation is over now. Coming back here won't change anything, so why don't you head home? No matter how many times I pleaded, they dismissed me with cruel indifference. In the end, I was painfully reminded that the world revolves around cunning, deceitful adults. Ethan, who was left paralyzed on his left side, began life in a wheelchair, and his dream of becoming a professional soccer player was shattered. I couldn't keep burdening the foster home forever, so I desperately begged the staff to let me work, despite being a middle schooler. I lied about my age and worked tirelessly, saving every penny I could. I was determined to get a job after graduating high school, though my grades had always been excellent throughout elementary and middle school. I understand how you feel, but your grades are outstanding. For your future wages and your brother's care, you should at least finish high school. They even told me, you don't need to worry about high school tuition. Your mother left a small inheritance, and you can cover the rest with scholarships and part-time work. While I was torn about my future, one day Ethan said with a smile, "You're smart, Andrew. I bet you could become a doctor and heal me someday." His words inspired me, and I decided to pursue a career in medicine. With my determination, I consulted with my teacher and the foster home staff to figure out how to keep costs as low as possible while continuing my education. I went to a public high school. I focused on my studies while using all my weekends and evenings to work part-time. Even with my busy schedule, I kept my grades up thanks to the support of the foster home staff. I hated the thought of relying on them too much, but I had no choice. Instead, I swore to myself that I would repay their kindness when I became an adult. After graduating high school, I had no choice but to leave the foster home. And although it pained me, I asked them to continue caring for Ethan while I lived alone, balancing my studies and part-time jobs, pushing myself harder than ever. I thoroughly researched every financial aid program available for college and took full advantage of them. Although it was considered a third-rate university, I graduated at the top of my medical school class and worked hard to secure a job, eventually making it to today's orientation. After everything I had endured to reach this point, I couldn't believe that the man I despised had become the new hospital director. At the time, I hadn't realized that the very man who ruined my brother's life had somehow become a doctor entrusted with saving lives, a thought that filled me with rage until the surrounding voices brought me back to my senses. When I looked up at the stage, I saw Richard being called up along with a few other doctors. "This is Richard Goodman, an exceptional doctor who will be joining us as the new head of surgery this April," the host announced. As they continued introducing the department heads, I noticed George whispering something to Richard. And the moment the introduction ended, Richard grabbed the microphone from the host and pointed straight at me. "There's a liar from the foster. He's sneaking into this orientation," he sneered at me with a twisted grin, taunting me. Naturally, the people in the hall turned their attention toward me, and the room erupted in whispers. George, puzzled by the commotion, watched Richard, who whispered to him again while glancing at me. George's face darkened as he recognized me, and he took the list of new hires from his secretary and quickly found my name. His expression twisted as if to say, "How dare you come here to bring up the past?" I was stunned that he even remembered the accident. "This orientation is for elite doctors. This is no place for someone like you from a foster home." Despite being the director, he insulted me in front of all the new hires. As if I'd ever worked in a hospital run by the family responsible for Ethan's tragedy. My fists clenched with rage. Richard peeked at my entry form in George's hand and burst out laughing, saying, "A poor loser like you? A doctor? Your medical license must be fake." Then he added with a sneer, "Which med school did you even graduate from? Never heard of it. And does it even exist?" George followed up with another shout. "We don't need anyone from a third-rate med school raised in a foster home at this prestigious hospital. Get out of here. Someone, throw him out." Within moments, several security guards rushed toward me. Unable to react or argue back, I told myself I didn't need to shout anyway, forced myself to stay calm, stood up, and said, "Understood. I'll leave now." But even though I wasn't resisting at all, the security guards grabbed my arms, dragged me out of the hall, and shoved me roughly as if I were a criminal. They took me all the way to the building's entrance and then pushed me hard while yelling, "Hurry up and get out of here!" Before turning away and leaving, I stumbled and fell onto the ground, landing hard on my backside. Ouch. This is pathetic. As I sat there, paralyzed by frustration and humiliation, a calm and gentle voice suddenly came from above me saying, "My goodness, how rough they were. Are you all right?" I looked up and saw an elderly man holding out his hand to me. I took his hand and stood up saying, "Oh, thank you so much." "You really had a tough time there." By the way, the man casually reached into his suit pocket and took out a business card. "I have an urgent matter today, so I'm sorry to trouble you, but I'd be happy if you could contact me later when you have time," he said with a kind smile. His warmth, despite his busy schedule, brought tears to my eyes. The man added firmly, "Promise me you'll get in touch." He gently patted my shoulder and walked away with a reassuring smile. 1 week after that incident, I was walking toward the medical office, dressed in a brand new white coat. I had officially started my journey as a new doctor. Of course, it wasn't at the hospital where the Goodman family worked. It was at a rival hospital, one that stood as a competitor to theirs. After calming down from the incident, I contacted the man who helped me that day. It was Mr. Sam Stanton. It turned out that Sam was the chairman of the board of a renowned medical foundation. When I contacted him, he said, "I'd really like to meet you in person and talk." He invited me to his home, where I shared everything that happened at the orientation, my brother Ethan's story, and all the details about the accident. After I finished, Sam had a serious expression, but then smiled gently. "You've been through more than words can describe, but you're safe now, and leave everything to me." He helped me find a new job at a top-tier hospital where his son was the director. Although I had graduated from what some considered a third-rate university, I had worked hard throughout my time there and even graduated at the top of my class. My thesis had caught the attention of the previous director of the hospital where the Goodman family worked, which was why I'd initially received the offer, but that offer was revoked due to George Goodman's personal grudge. However, thanks to meeting Sam, I was able to start my career as a doctor. One day, while I was diligently working as a new physician, I received several missed calls from the same unknown number. I was too busy with work and couldn't return the calls. But then the hospital phone rang. "Dr. Carter, you have a call? Thank you, please connect me." I picked up the phone, wondering who it could be, and to my surprise, it was George Goodman. "Why haven't you been answering your phone? You made me call the hospital directly." "Well, as you know, I work at this hospital now." "I don't care about that. You need to come to my hospital immediately. Do you understand?" He was just as arrogant and overbearing as ever. "Why should I go there? You're the one who revoked my offer in the first place." "Well, it's because the research from your thesis is crucial for our hospital. The research team we put together based on your findings is in an uproar. Just send over data at the very least. Dealing with you has been nothing but trouble." According to his one-sided demands, they had formed a research team for future medical advancements using the content of my thesis, and now wanted me to hand over the rights. In fact, when I showed my thesis to Sam, he said, "This is a treasure trove of ideas, essential for the future of medicine," and other doctors who read it gave it high praise as well. Based on that research, a new drug development and medical improvement team was formed, and we presented our findings after making significant progress. The presentation was so well received that I was interviewed by the media, which led to even more attention and recognition. Our hospital quickly rose to prominence. Originally, it was my research that had earned me the initial job offer, but as I've said, George canceled it out of personal spite. There was no way I'd go back now. It would be a betrayal of Sam's kindness. I'm continuing my research here, and I have no intention of ever working at your hospital. What then? You'll ruin your hospital's reputation, he threatened. In a flash of anger, I shot back. Try it if you dare. I hung up the phone firmly. Though I didn't regret standing my ground, I wondered if I'd gone too far. So I immediately informed Sam about the call. You really gave it to him? He didn't get angry at my final words. Instead, he praised me. He said, leave this matter to me and focus on your medical work. So I reluctantly decided to entrust it to him. A few months later, the Goodman family became the center of media scandals and tabloid headlines, and of course, not in a good way. Under George Goodman's arrogant, authoritarian leadership, the prestigious university hospital's reputation plummeted. Reports of embezzlement, cover-ups of medical errors, and other misdeeds surfaced. The headlines read, Prestige Hospital falls from grace. Richard was also exposed for falsifying his academic record, securing his position through favoritism, and blaming other doctors and staff for his mistakes, forcing many to resign. The media didn't hold back, even digging into his misconduct during his student years. Finally, the truth about Ethan's car accident cover-up came to light. Though the statute of limitations on the accident had expired after 3 years, the severity of the incident, their poor treatment of the victim, and the cover-up became widely known, leading to the Goodman family's complete downfall. Since everything was going so smoothly, I asked Sam, how did you manage this? But he simply smiled and said,
Well, maybe it was just divine justice.
A chill ran down my spine, so I decided not to press any further and instead focused on my medical work. I believed that dedicating myself to medicine was the best way to repay Sam for saving me and my brother from our struggles. I recall the day of the orientation when Sam extended his hand to help me. At the time, Sam had been invited to the ceremony as the chairman of a prestigious medical foundation, but he disliked formal events and had declined to attend. However, something had drawn him to check the scene from outside. With a laugh, he said,
I think fate gave me the chance to meet you, Andrew.
After I had told him everything that day, Sam took in Ethan, who had been staying at the foster home beyond the usual age limit, and even welcomed both of us as his adopted sons. Our house is wheelchair accessible, and my wife is thrilled because our kids left home, so she's happy to have you both here. If you ever need an aid, just let me know. I received so much of his kindness that I wondered if I could ever repay it in my lifetime. By the way, although I insisted on paying Ethan's aide salary, Sam seemed a little dissatisfied. Later, his wife confided in me that he wanted to be relied upon as a parent.
Time passed.
Hey, Andre. Ethan was smiling at me in the living room of Sam's home. Since then, I had worked hard and earned the title of genius pediatric surgeon. Thanks to Sam, the director, and the research team, we had begun treatment to help Ethan recover from his paralysis. Although he was still in a wheelchair, he had been steadily improving, and now he could speak quite well and even move his left hand a little.
Ethan had found a new dream.
I couldn't become a soccer player, but someday I want to teach kids how to play soccer. As for me, I remembered the kids at the foster home who would hold back from saying they didn't feel well because they didn't want to trouble the staff. Because of Ethan and the other children I'd seen, I wanted to provide medical care they could receive without fear. So I began offering free monthly checkups at the foster home where I grew up and other nearby facilities. Gradually, other pediatricians supported the cause and began helping, and the number of participating facilities grew.
Ethan was delighted and said, Andrew, you're so cool. I'm proud of you.
I finally felt like I was beginning to repay the foster home staff for all they had done for us. We even discovered hidden medical conditions in some children during the checkups. The staff thanked me, and I couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Reflecting on the downfall of the Goodman family, I felt I had learned firsthand that what goes around comes around. I resolved to continue protecting the health of children who carry the future, doing everything I can in my capacity as a doctor. I also vowed to cherish my connections with people and my actions each day, never forgetting gratitude as I move forward. During my termination discussion, he grinned and said, "We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary."
Just cutting costs, nothing personal.
Victor Hale is my name. I have worked as the chief systems engineer at Veltria for 18 years, and I am 55 years old. I had designed every expansion, constructed their whole infrastructure from the ground up, and kept everything operating so efficiently that the executives were unaware of how much the business relied on me, until they decided they could no longer afford me. Graham Vickers, the recently hired chief technology officer who had only been with the company for 6 months, was seated across from me. He had an MBA from Cornell, wore fancy spectacles, and was 42. He had been hired to modernize operations, which reportedly meant laying off the most seasoned employees first. Human Resources Diane passed a packet across the table and remarked, "The severance package is generous."
2 months' pay plus the vacation time you have accrued.
I said thank you, nodded, and accepted the packet. "Do you have anything further to say?" Graham appeared nearly disheartened. Perhaps he had anticipated my argument or threat of legal action. Give him a way to express to the board how challenging I was being.
What should I say to you? The majority of people in your position have queries and worries. I gave a shrug. It seems fairly simple to me.
Diane and Graham gazed at each other, both of them equally confused by my composure. They didn't realize that I wasn't at ease. I had just finished. There is a distinction.
Graham went on, well, we'd appreciate your help with the transition.
The system architecture will require some direction from the new engineering team. A consultancy agreement for a few weeks, maybe.
Even though I knew I wouldn't, I said, I'll think about it.
We exchanged handshakes. I tidied up my desk without protest. One cardboard box contains 18 years of labor. A few co-workers turned away nervously, fearing the same fate might befall them, but I nodded goodbye. My phone buzzed as I made my way to my pickup in the parking garage. Alan, the database administrator, texted 12 years ago. I hired.
This is Vic. The entire squad is in a panic. I didn't answer.
At home, I had a drink of bourbon while watching the sunset paint the water copper from my deck with a view of Lake Ontario. Elaine, my wife, touched my shoulder.
Now what are you going to do? I gave a shrug. Something is going to appear.
I hadn't just constructed their systems, which was something Graham was unaware of and hadn't bothered to find out. Due to the company's consistent refusal to provide funding for a comprehensive documentation team, I had custom-coded major areas myself with little documentation. The complex network design, the hidden security layers, and the deep redundancies were all only understood by me, and I had no intention of telling anyone about it. Back when Veltria Housing was still known as Bayview Properties, it was a modest real estate management company with 12 staff members and 4 apartment buildings. 2 desktop PCs, a fax machine, and a dial-up internet connection made up their whole IT setup. I was hired away from a consulting job in Syracuse by the owner, Harold Bay.
We're growing, he informed me. We need someone who can construct something sturdy for us.
Over 18 years, I turned that rudimentary setup into an integrated property management system that handled everything from tenant applications and background checks to automated maintenance requests and rent collection across 63 properties in 4 states. I built it piece by piece, adapting, upgrading, refining as the company grew. When Harrow retired 5 years ago, his son Justin sold the company to a private equity firm that rebranded it as Veltria Housing. They kept me on, impressed by what I'd built. But things began to change. New executives, new priorities. Quarterly targets became more important than long-term stability.
My warning signs came gradually. First, they rejected my proposal for a documentation team. Too expensive, they said. We'll get to it next quarter. That quarter never came.
Then they started bringing in consultants, young MBA types who talked about disrupting property management and leveraging cloud solutions. They'd sit through my explanations of our system architecture with glazed eyes, then recommend off-the-shelf solutions that wouldn't integrate with our custom infrastructure. I kept pushing back, explaining why their approach wouldn't work, showing them the custom code that made our system unique. Eventually, they stopped inviting me to planning meetings.
Elaine noticed it before I did. They're pushing you out, she said one night over dinner. You need to prepare. I brushed her off.
They need me. No one else understands how the whole system works together.
That might be exactly the problem, she replied.
6 months ago, they hired Graham as the new CTO. He came from a banking software company and immediately started talking about standardization and legacy system replacement. He hired 3 junior engineers fresh out of college, had them shadowing me, asking questions about the system. I answered their questions, but I knew they weren't grasping the complexities. How could they? It had taken me years to build those systems, to understand the interdependencies, to create the redundancies that kept everything running smoothly when problems arose.
Last week, Graham stopped by my office. Quick meeting tomorrow morning, he said casually. Just a quarterly check-in. I should have seen it coming.
The first call came 2 weeks after my termination. I was in my home office updating my resume when my phone rang. Graham Vickers. I let it go to voicemail. Victor, it's Graham. We're having some issues with the tenant portal. The junior team is working on it, but they're having trouble understanding some of your code architecture. Could you give us a call back? It would just be a quick consultation.
I deleted the message and went back to my resume. 3 more calls came that day, each voicemail sounding increasingly desperate. By evening, Alan texted me, "System's been down all day. Maintenance requests aren't processing. Graham's losing his mind." The next morning, Diane from HR called.
Victor, I hope you're doing well. I'm calling because we'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement, just temporary, to help with some current system issues. The compensation would be quite generous.
I picked up my phone. How generous? $300 per hour. Minimum 4-hour engagement. I'll think about it and get back to you, I said, then hung up.
I sat at my kitchen table staring out at the lake. Elaine placed a cup of coffee in front of me.
What are you thinking? I'm thinking they're finding out exactly what I'm worth.
Over the next 3 days, the calls increased. Graham, Diane, even Justin Bay, who was still on the board. The tenant portal was down. The maintenance scheduling system was throwing errors. The automatic payment processing had failed, affecting thousands of residents.
I didn't respond to any of them.
On day 4, an email arrived from Devlin Systems, a regional competitor to Veltria. They managed fewer properties, but had been expanding rapidly.
The email was from their director of technology, Lawrence Devlin himself.
Victor, I heard about your situation at Veltria. We've always admired your work from afar. Would you be interested in discussing opportunities with us? We're looking to upgrade our entire property management infrastructure.
I replied and set up a meeting for the following day.
That evening, as Lane and I were preparing dinner, my doorbell rang. Graham Vickers stood on my porch, his designer glasses slightly askew, his normally immaculate suit wrinkled. Victor, I apologize for dropping by unannounced, but we have an emergency situation. The entire system is down. Nothing is working. The team can't figure out what's wrong or how to fix it.
I leaned against the door frame. That sounds serious.
It is. We need your help. The board has authorized me to offer you a substantial consulting fee, $500 per hour, whatever it takes. I thought about the cardboard box in my garage. 18 years of work reduced to a few mementos. I thought about nothing personal, just cost-cutting. I thought about the documentation team. They'd never approved. I'm sorry to hear about your troubles, I said quietly. But I have an interview tomorrow. Something will turn up just like I thought. I closed the door on his stunned face and went back to making dinner. For the first time since my termination, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just clarity.
I wasn't going to help them fix what they'd broken.
The interview with Lawrence Devlin went better than expected. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Rochester, away from both companies' offices. I've followed your work for years, Lawrence said, stirring his coffee. That integrated property management system you built at Veltria is legendary in our industry. Nobody else has anything close to it.
Thank you, I said. It took time.
That's what I want to talk about, time. We're looking to build something similar, but we don't want to start from scratch. We need someone who understands the architecture, the integration points, the security layers. Someone who can build us something better than what's out there.
I'm interested.
Lawrence smiled. Good, because I'm prepared to offer you the position of Chief Systems Architect. Full benefits, stock options, and a salary 20% higher than what you were making at Veltria.
It was a good offer. Too good, almost.
Why me? I asked. There are younger engineers out there, cheaper ones. Lawrence laughed. You sound like your former employer. We tried that route. Hired 3 bright young engineers from top schools. They built us something sleek and modern that crashes every time we get more than 100 simultaneous users. We don't need cheap. We need reliable.
I accepted the offer the next day.
Meanwhile, Veltria's problems were escalating. Alan kept me updated through occasional texts. The system had been partially restored, but critical functions were still failing. They'd brought in an expensive consulting firm that specialized in legacy system recovery.
A week after I started at Devlin, Graham called again.
Victor, please. This is getting serious. We've lost access to payment records for the past 3 months. Tenants are complaining about incorrect charges. The consulting team says they need your input on the database structure.
I was tempted to ignore it, but something made me pick up.
Graham, I'm employed elsewhere now.
Exclusive contract. I'm afraid I can't help you. We'll double whatever they're paying you for just 2 days of your time. It's not about the money.
Then what is it?
About revenge? Are you enjoying watching us struggle? I paused, considering my answer carefully.
No, Graham. I'm not enjoying it. But you made a business decision. You decided my experience wasn't worth the cost. Now you're discovering what that actually means.
The board wants to discuss bringing you back. Full salary plus a signing bonus.
For a moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it quickly faded. Going back would solve nothing. The same executives who decided I was expendable would be waiting for the next opportunity to cut costs.
I appreciate the offer, but I've made a commitment to Devlin Systems.
Graham's voice hardened. You know, there could be legal implications if we discover you intentionally made our systems difficult to maintain. Non-compete clauses. Intellectual property concerns.
There it was, the threat I'd been expecting.
The system is exactly as it was when the company repeatedly denied my request for a documentation team, I replied evenly. Every line of code belongs to Veltria, as specified in my employment contract. I've taken nothing with me except my experience, but feel free to have your lawyers contact mine. I hung up, hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from anger I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. The accusation that I'd somehow sabotaged him was the final insult. At Devlin, I was starting fresh. Building systems properly from the ground up, with full documentation, training programs for the engineering team, and redundancies that will prevent the kind of catastrophe Veltria was experiencing. I wasn't going to look back anymore, but I wasn't going to help them either. Some lessons had to be learned the hard way. A month after joining Devlin Systems, I received an unexpected visitor in my new office. Alan, my former database administrator, stood awkwardly in the doorway holding a laptop bag.
Got time for lunch? He asked.
Over sandwiches at a nearby deli, Alan filled me in on the chaos at Veltria. It's worse than you think, he said, lowering his voice despite the noisy lunchtime crowd. They've lost access to historical data going back 3 years. The backup systems are corrupted somehow. The consulting firm is saying they might need to rebuild from scratch. I wasn't surprised. The backup system had multiple redundancies and security protocols that need to be followed precisely. Skip one step, and the entire process would fail in a way designed to protect tenant data from unauthorized access. That's not all, Alan continued. I found something when I was trying to help the consultants understand the payment processing system. Graham had been planning your termination for months. He'd been meeting with the board, convincing them that your custom infrastructure was too expensive to maintain.
How do you know this?
Alan pulled out his laptop and showed me a series of emails he discovered in the system archives. Emails between Graham and the board discussing the legacy staff reduction plan and specifically naming me as the first target. He told them they could replace you with cheaper engineers and transition to off-the-shelf solutions within 6 months, Alan said. He projected cost savings of over $1 million annually. I read through the emails, feeling a strange detachment. One line from Graham stood out. Hale's custom systems are unnecessarily complex. He's made himself indispensable by design, not necessity. There's more, Alan said. The private equity firm that owns Veltria is planning to sell. They've been prepping for this for over a year. Graham was brought in specifically to cut costs and make the company look more profitable before the sale. Now it all made sense. The push for standardization, the resistance to proper documentation, the sudden focus on reducing senior staff costs.
It wasn't about improving the company. It was about dressing it up for a quick flip. Why are you showing me this? I asked.
Alan closed his laptop. Because I quit yesterday. And I'm not the only one. Half the IT department has left. The consultants are estimating at least 6 months to restore full functionality, maybe longer. He hesitated. And because Veltria's biggest client, Westbrook Properties, is considering jumping ship. They've lost faith in the management system. I thought about the implications. Westbrook represented nearly 30% of Veltria's revenue. Losing them would be devastating, especially with a sale pending.
What will you do now? I asked.
Alan grinned. Actually, I was hoping Devlin might be hiring database administrators. Later that afternoon, I spoke with Lawrence about bringing Alan on board. He agreed immediately. We were building a team brick by brick with people who understood what it meant to create systems that lasted. That evening, I received another call from Graham. This time his voice had lost its authoritative edge. "Victor, please. The situation is critical. Westbrook is threatening to terminate their contract. The board is questioning my decisions. We need your help."
"I'm sorry, Graham. I can't help you. Name your price. Anything."
"It's not about price. It's about respect for experience, for the work that goes into building something right the first time."
The line was silent for a moment.
"You knew this would happen," he said finally. "You knew exactly what would break and when."
"No, Graham. I just knew what I had built and what it took to maintain it. Information I tried to share many times."
I ended the call feeling neither triumph nor regret, just a quiet certainty that some lessons can only be learned through failure.
The opportunity came faster than I expected.
2 months into my role at Devlin Systems, Lawrence called me into his office. "I just got off the phone with Jeffrey Westbrook," he said, referring to the CEO of Westbrook Properties. "They're officially terminating their contract with Veltria next month. They want to know if we can handle their portfolio." Westbrook Properties managed over 10,000 units across the Northeast. It would more than double Devlin's current operations. "We're not ready for that kind of scale," I admitted. "The new system is coming along, but it's only halfway there." Lawrence leaned forward. "What would it take to get ready if we had to?" I thought about it. 3 more senior engineers, dedicated server infrastructure, and at least 8 weeks of development time. Even then, it would be tight. Jeffrey's desperate. Veltria's failures are affecting their reputation with tenants. He's willing to give us 12 weeks and fund the infrastructure expansion.
This was the moment, the turning point.
If Devlin took on Westbrook and succeeded, it would establish us as a serious competitor in the industry. If we failed, it could sink both companies. "Let me think about the architecture," I said. "I'll drop a plan by tomorrow." That night, I barely slept. I sketched system diagrams, mapped data migration pathways, considered scaling challenges. By morning, I had a plan, ambitious but achievable, a hybrid approach that would let us onboard Westbrook's properties in stages, minimizing disruption.
When I presented it to Lawrence, he studied it carefully.
"This is solid," he said finally. "But I notice you've included a substantial documentation phase that adds 3 weeks to the timeline." "It's non-negotiable," I replied. "That's where Veltria failed. We document everything from day one. We train the team on every component. No single points of failure." Lawrence nodded. "I'll take your word for it. Let's move forward." The next weeks were intense. We hired 5 more engineers, including 2 who had recently left Veltria. Alan built a database migration tool that could translate Veltria's data structure into our new system. I designed a modular architecture that could scale with Westbrook's needs. Halfway through the project, I received an email from Justin Bayou, the former owner's son, who still sat on Veltria's board. "Victor, I want to apologize for how things ended. The board was misled about the implications of letting you go. Graham has been removed as CTO. We're struggling to recover, and Westbrook's departure will hit us hard. If you're ever interested in coming back, the door is open."
I didn't respond.
10 weeks into our 12-week timeline, we were ready for a staged rollout. Westbrook's smallest region, comprising 2,000 units in western New York, would migrate first. If successful, the remaining regions would follow. The day before the migration, Lawrence called me into his office again. A familiar face was waiting, Jeffrey Westbrook himself. "So, you're the system architect?" Jeffrey said, standing to shake my hand. "Lawrence has told me a lot about you."
"All good, I hope," I smiled.
"He says you built us something that won't break down every time we add a new property, something that will grow with us."
"That's the plan. I also hear you used to work for Veltria." I nodded, unsure where he was going with this.
"They're in trouble, you know. The private equity firm is trying to sell, but with Westbrook leaving and their system still not fully functional, they're not finding many interested buyers."
He paused. "Except one." "Who's that?" I asked, though I suspected the answer.
"Devlin Systems," Lawrence said. "We're considering making an offer at a substantial discount to what they were valued at 6 months ago."
I looked between them, processing the implications.
"If that happens," Jeffrey continued, "we'd want someone who understands both companies to lead the integration. Someone who could salvage what's valuable from Veltria's infrastructure while transitioning everything to your new architecture."
"Are you asking if I'd be willing to work on that?" I clarified.
Lawrence nodded. "Only if the acquisition goes through, and only if you're comfortable with it." I thought about the irony, the system I'd built, the people I'd trained, the company that had discarded me, all potentially coming back under my direction. "I'd be willing," I said finally. "But I have one condition. We do it right. Full documentation, proper training, no shortcuts."
"Agreed," Lawrence said. "We've learned that lesson."
As I walked back to my office, I felt no vindication, no desire for revenge, just a simple satisfaction of knowing that good work done right eventually speaks for itself. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of what had once been Veltria Housing's headquarters. The sign now read, "Devlin Integrated Property Management." The acquisition had gone through for less than a quarter of what the company had been valued at before my departure. Lawrence and I walked through the office, greeting former Veltria employees who would be staying on through the transition. Some looked away awkwardly. Others smiled with relief. A few, those who had worked closely with me over the years, nodded with quiet understanding. Graham was gone, along with most of the executive team that had approved my termination. Justin Bayou had stayed on as a consultant, helping ease the transition with legacy clients. When we reached the server room, my old domain, I paused. Through the glass, I could see the hardware I'd specified, the blinking lights of systems I'd designed.
"Want to go in?" Lawrence asked.
"No need," I replied. "We'll be migrating everything to the new infrastructure anyway." In the main conference room, the remaining Veltria staff had gathered for the announcement. Lawrence introduced me as the chief integration officer who would be overseeing the technical transition. "Many of you already know Victor," he said. "He built the original systems that ran this company for nearly 2 decades. Now he'll be guiding us through the integration of both companies' technologies into something better than either had before." As I looked out at the faces, some familiar, some new, I felt no triumph, no desire to say, "I told you so." What would be the point? Instead, I spoke briefly about the transition plan, the timeline, the support that would be available to everyone during the process. I emphasized that no one would be left behind due to cost-cutting measures. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. 1 year after the acquisition, Devlin Integrated Property Management had become the largest property management company in the Northeast. The migration was complete, with all properties now running on the new system I designed, fully documented, properly staffed, and functioning smoothly. On a crisp autumn morning, I drove to the office for a final meeting with Lawrence. The leaves along Lake Ontario had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, a fitting backdrop for the conclusion of this chapter. "The board approved your proposal," Lawrence said as soon as I sat down. "The technical education division will launch next quarter. You'll have full autonomy to design the curriculum and hire instructors." This had been my condition for staying after the integration was complete. Not a higher title or more money, but the creation of a division dedicated to training the next generation of systems engineers and architects, teaching them not just how to code, but how to build things meant to last.
Thank you, I said. That means a lot.
No thank you, Lawrence replied. What you've built here, it's remarkable. Not just the technology, but the culture around it, the documentation, the knowledge sharing, the emphasis on quality over quick fixes. Later that afternoon, I cleared out my integration office. Unlike my hasty exit from Veltria, this was a planned transition to my new role. As I packed my things, Justin Bayview knocked on the door.
Got a minute? He asked. We walked to the small courtyard outside the building.
My father asked about you, he said. He's retired in Florida now, but he still follows company news. He was glad to hear you were back, in a manner of speaking.
How is Harold? I asked.
Good. Fishing a lot. Justin paused. He always said letting you go would be the biggest mistake this company could make. Turns out he was right.
I nodded, unsure what to say.
I learned something from all this, Justin continued. Value isn't always visible until it's gone. As I drove home along the lakeshore, I thought about value, of experience, of care taken, of doing things right the first time, about systems built to last and the people who build them. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't needed to. I'd simply moved forward, building something better, something that would outlast any individual decision or short-term thinking. Sometimes the best response to being undervalued is simply to prove your worth elsewhere and let the results speak for themselves.
You've been let go. I'll take care of the rest. As he continued, Department Head Stephen burst out laughing.
I called Access Logic already. I informed them that I was going instead.
What were you saying? Nobody informed me of this.
It's obvious that Stephen made this decision alone. There is nothing I can do if he's already spoken to the client. With a contented smile, Stephen gave me a letter of resignation as I stood there, dumbfounded. The negotiations are being handled by me. You're simply getting in the way. You understand what that means, don't you?
This is insane.
In essence, he was telling me to step down so that I wouldn't be able to get involved. I had put up with all of Stephen's snark and spite up until now, and with Stephen, my rage finally erupted, totally and uncontrollably.
All well, then. I'll let you handle the discussions.
Whoa, that was simpler than I anticipated. That works for me, then. Stephen smiled self-satisfiedly. I doubt he ever thought I might still have a chance. I'm 42 years old and my name is Thomas. I used to work for Alto Networks, a business that produced artificial intelligence technologies. The company works in several different industries and mostly focuses on B2B solutions. The industry has recently taken notice of our efforts to create specialized chips for AI processing. Few Japanese companies concentrate on AI development, and the majority of cutting-edge AI chips are created abroad. As a result, businesses frequently contact Alto Networks in an attempt to collaborate on research initiatives or utilize our technology. As one of the few AI development businesses in Japan, Alto Networks has great hopes for us. I was a sales manager in the AI branch of this organization. As I threw myself into my work at this quickly expanding company, my wife and kids have been there to support me. Alto Networks is currently going through a pivotal period. Our AI chips have been the subject of a significant negotiation. Access Logic, a big business, wants to purchase our network AI chips. Access Logic creates a variety of systems, such as robots and transportation. These areas are requiring a large number of AI chips to keep up with the rapid advancements in AI technology. According to reports, they are prepared to pay $7.8 billion. They want us to be their long-term partner and provide chips at that quantity. In Alto Networks history, it'll be the biggest contract. It might be a really big deal. Being a part of the sales team made me feel accountable. Then an even more unexpected event occurred.
I want you to handle the negotiations with Axis Logic. Me, sir? I was shocked when Alto Networks' Mr. Kennedy selected me to spearhead the transaction.
I had a lengthy conversation about it with the board, Mr. Thompson, and the executive director. We all agreed that you were the best candidate for the position because of your track record of sales, dependability, and commitment. Are you going to accept it? The execs were shut up in a meeting room for hours the other day, as I recall. They were apparently debating who would be in charge of this transaction. It was a true honor to be selected in this manner. I had the top performance in the sales division, so that was the reason it made sense. Also, I had a certain connection with Axis Logic that they might be counting on. Still, I couldn't help but question the decision. I'm honored, but are you sure I'm the right person? I mean, surely there were others more qualified, like Stephen, for example. I felt uneasy taking on a deal this big over someone in a higher position. But Mr. Kennedy gave me a warm smile and said, "We discussed it thoroughly and agreed you're the best person for the job. This is a consensus we all reached after careful consideration. I won't force you, but I truly hope you'll accept."
All right. I understand.
Although I was unsure, I nodded. Part of me still hesitated, wondering if I was really the right choice. But this was the biggest deal we'd ever had. If I could be the one to handle it, I couldn't ask for a greater honor. Feeling the weight of the task on my shoulders, I accepted the responsibility. Mr. Kennedy walked away. Once he was out of sight, I let out a deep sigh. I don't treat some negotiations as more important than others, but this time I really couldn't afford to make a mistake. As I started thinking about what to do next, someone approached me. "A massive deal, huh? Must be nice being the guy the higher-ups like." Stephen. It was Stephen. He may have secretly overheard what happened earlier.
Look at you. You're just a manager and they hand you this huge contract. You must be thrilled. That's not how I see it. Then why the long face? I don't like it.
Whatever expression I had, he would have hated it anyway. He's been with the company since graduating, so he has many years of service. And in the past, his impressive sales performance earned him a promotion to department head. But lately, his results have been poor. Maybe that's why he's been increasingly harsh with his subordinates. While he's been slipping, my sales performance has only improved over the years. He must hate that. If you pull this off, you'll be next in line for department head. Threatening my position must feel pretty good. Deep down, I bet you think I'm a joke.
I don't think that at all. Yeah, right. Makes me sick.
If things keep going the way they are, I'll eventually become the next department head. That only adds fuel to his resentment. The $7.8 billion deal was always going to be between Stephen and me. But in the end, Mr. Kennedy and the others chose me, not him. That must have been a bitter, humiliating blow. Do your best. I'm sure the next department head won't need any help from me.
Understood.
Spitting his words full of resentment, Stephen walked off. There's no point in clashing within the same sales team. But if I said we should all work together to make this deal a success, he'd probably call me arrogant. It was clear that not involving Stephen in the $7.8 to $8 billion negotiation would be the wisest choice. With that in mind, I began preparing for the deal. From that day on, I dedicated myself to ensuring its success. I anticipated questions from the client and created the documents needed for the presentation. I also researched Axis Logic thoroughly, considering how our AI chips could contribute to their operations. I didn't let myself become overconfident just because they had shown interest in our technology. It's these small, steady efforts that lead to successful negotiations. Thinking about the weight of handling a $7.8 billion deal was overwhelming. But I reminded myself that Mr. Kennedy and the others entrusted me with this because they believed in me. I had to live up to their expectations. With that resolve, I poured myself into my work every day. Meanwhile, Stephen's hostility only grew stronger by the day. "Hey, you're keeping up with the prep, right?" Don't go running off with your tail between your legs now. Must be nice being the favorite, getting the good deals handed to you. At the office, he would glare at me and try to throw me off. Of course, he offered no help with the negotiation. It was as if he was praying for me to fail, but I didn't let his pressure get to me, and I kept preparing. I consulted with Mr. Kennedy and gathered as much information about the client as I could. I even asked Mr. Thompson to role-play the negotiation with me so I wouldn't miss a single chance.
A few days before the meeting, Mr. Kennedy came to my desk and said, "Looks like things are coming along well." "Yes, sir." "I can see how hard you've been working on this. I have full confidence in you."
He nodded with satisfaction. Knowing that he recognized my efforts made me happy. "If this negotiation is a success, your promotion is practically guaranteed. I'm counting on you."
"And, of course, you'll be closing the largest deal in our company's history, so it only makes sense."
Thinking of Stephen made it hard to celebrate openly, but knowing that Mr. Kennedy held me in such high regard was something to be proud of. I swallowed hard and renewed my determination to succeed. And then the day before the big meeting finally arrived. I had done everything I could to prepare. No matter what questions they asked, I was confident I could answer them. I was sure I had a presentation that would capture their interest. With that in mind, I began my final review. But just as I was working at my desk, I heard an unexpected voice.
"Hey, Thomas. Stephen, what's going on?"
Stephen, who had been oddly quiet the last few days, approached me. I had a bad feeling. And then he gave me a sly grin and said,
"You're fired. I'm handling the negotiation from here."
His words were so shocking that my eyes widened. As I stood there speechless, Stephen continued laughing.
"I already called Axis Logic. I told him I'll be the one going."
"What? I haven't heard anything about that." Neither Mr. Kennedy nor Thompson had mentioned anything of the sort. This was clearly Stephen acting on his own. At this point, everything I had prepared was completely thrown into disarray. If the client had already heard from him, there was no way to backtrack. Now, contacting them to say the representative had changed again would only breed mistrust. As I stood there in disbelief, Stephen happily handed me a document.
"Here, your resignation letter." "A resignation letter?"
Still trying to understand his intentions, I watched as he placed the paper on my desk. The title clearly read Letter of Resignation.
With a smug grin, Stephen said,
I'm handling the deal. You're in the way. You know what that means, right? This is ridiculous.
In other words, he was forcing me to resign so I couldn't interfere. He wasn't going to let me go until I submitted that letter. I never imagined I'd be sabotaged like this right before the negotiation. I had always endured Stephen's snide remarks until now. A part of me always wondered, weren't we supposed to be working together? Instead, he saw me as a rival and now was sabotaging the deal out of spite. That was the final straw. I couldn't hold back my anger anymore. Fine, then I'll leave the negotiations in your capable hands.
Wow, that was easier than I thought. Makes my life easier.
I'm sure you'll handle it far more smoothly than I ever could.
Now you're getting it.
Stephen gave a smug smile. He did outrank me after all. He certainly was a better man. He probably never imagined I still had options left. I felt sorry for Mr. Kennedy, but this was all Stephen's doing. I calmly wrote my resignation letter and handed it to him.
Well, then I'll be on my way. Yeah, good luck out there.
But that kind of arrogance never ends well. If this was how he wanted to play it, I was ready to respond.
After clearing out my personal belongings, I left Alto Networks.
The next day, I was sitting in a room at another company. While going through some formalities, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. At first, I thought it would stop, but the calls just kept coming. A glance at the screen showed that it was Stephen trying to reach me. Noticing my concern, the person in front of me spoke.
If it's bothering you, feel free to answer it. Thank you. It sounds like he's in quite a panic, so I'll take you up on that.
I stood up and stepped away from the table to answer the call. As soon as I picked up, Stephen launched into a frantic tirade, skipping any greeting.
Thomas, where did you put the documents for the Access Logic meeting?
His voice was desperate. I figured he had every reason to panic, and I calmly replied, "Well, I've already resigned from Alto Networks, so I shredded every document I created for the negotiation." After submitting my resignation yesterday, I had cleaned out all my belongings. That included the documents I had prepared for the meeting with Access Logic, and they were all destroyed. I shredded everything thoroughly and with care. Of course, I also deleted all the negotiation data from my computer.
There's no way to recover it now.
You gotta be kidding me.
How am I supposed to handle the negotiation without those documents?
Well, you're the one going now, right? Then my documents shouldn't matter. I assume you've prepared your own materials, haven't you? I knew the truth. Stephen had been busy with other tasks and hadn't prepared anything at all for the negotiation with Access Logic. He planned to bring my work and steal the results for himself. He probably intended to tell Mr. Kennedy that I suddenly fell ill, something like being overwhelmed by pressure and unable to leave the house. An excuse that would sound believable enough.
Damn it, you.
In any case, I'm no longer part of your company. And if I was just in your way, then I'll leave things to you now.
Hey, Thomas.
He was desperate and about to attend a $7.8 billion negotiation without any documents. But why should I, after all his harassment, feel obliged to help him? Ignoring Stephen as he panicked over how to get the documents, I hung up the phone.
You seem to be dealing with quite a bit. When I returned to the table, the man in front of me spoke up. Right. Sorry to keep you waiting. No need to apologize. I'm just glad you came here.
His smile eased my tension. As for who this man was, I'll reveal that shortly.
I gathered most of what that call was about. In that case, how about this?
He made a suggestion. I wondered if it was really okay to go through with something like that, but it was his suggestion after all, and part of me wanted to do it. So I accepted and took action. When the time came for the meeting, Stephen arrived at Access Logic. Since the change of representative had already been communicated, he wasn't stopped at the entrance.
As planned, he was led to the conference room. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today.
Stephen entered the room looking pale. He must have tried to put together something after I hung up, but under time pressure, the documents were no doubt incomplete. He knew there was no way he could secure a $7.8 billion deal with such half-baked materials. But when Stephen stepped into the conference room, he was stunned by something completely unexpected.
Why are you here, Thomas?
Good to see you, Stephen.
Yes, the $7.8 billion deal was about to begin. And seated across from him as Access Logic's representative was me.
Why would someone who worked at Alto Networks just yesterday be sitting here now? For Stephen, this was beyond imagination.
You worked at Alto Networks until yesterday. Actually, I've had a personal connection with Mr. Nelson, the president of Access Logic, for a while now.
He's been trying to recruit me for some time. I kept turning him down because I liked working at Alto Networks. As a salesperson, I often attended industry events and networking functions, building many relationships. My sales skills were well known across the industry. Because of that, every time I interacted with executives from other companies, they would ask if I considered working for them. Mr. Nelson of Access Logic had personally scouted me under similar circumstances, but until now, I had been fully satisfied with my work at Alto Networks, so I generally turned down those offers, though Mr. Nelson remained particularly interested in me and continued reaching out. That's why, upon resigning, I finally accepted his offer. Maybe that's why Mr. Kennedy had chosen me in the first place, because he knew of this connection. So I've accepted a position at Access Logic. The reason I'm here today, participating in this $7.8 billion negotiation, is thanks to Mr. Nelson's generosity. He told me, go ahead and see what kind of face Stephen makes when he walks in. Stephen turned bright red. He hated being treated like a spectacle. He probably had a lot he wanted to shout, but it seemed he decided to focus on closing the deal. Then you're going to sign this contract, right? Trying to compose himself, he forced out the words. Maybe he was even relieved, thinking I would make things easier. But he shouldn't be so optimistic. You forced me to resign yesterday. Did you forget that? Stephen was at a loss for words. What he did yesterday. If he truly understood that, he would know better than to say anything careless.
I just thought you were under too much pressure. I was worried.
He kept trying to justify himself. Did he really think I would buy that? If you were really worried, shouldn't you have said something before switching out the lead on the deal? The reason he took the negotiation away from me was obvious. He couldn't stand that I was favored by upper management and entrusted with the biggest deal in the company's history. Someone like him would never genuinely be concerned about me. I did everything I could to make this negotiation a success. I discussed it with Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Thompson, and I prepared thoroughly. I remembered every effort I had made up to today. And yet, not only did you try to take over at the last minute, you even forced me to resign.
Do you really think that's acceptable?
However, all the hard work I had built up was suddenly trampled by Stephen. With all the time and heart I had put in, I couldn't possibly forgive it. Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Thompson, and my colleagues had supported me, but I had my limits too. So after being treated that way, I decided to move on to a company where I wouldn't have to deal with someone like Stephen. He clearly didn't like my decision, and he was grinding his teeth in frustration. I'm no longer a member of your company. Therefore, I have no obligation to protect your company's interests. Thomas, he raised his voice, but I wasn't about to back down.
Please leave, Stephen.
He clenched his teeth and stared at me, but he must have realized I wouldn't budge. Looking bitter, he stood up and left the room. I returned to the room I had just come from. Waiting there was Mr. Nelson. He looked eager to hear what had happened. This was his office. The man I was talking to during Stephen's frantic call was him.
So how did it go? He seemed pretty humiliated.
Mr. Nelson gave a satisfied smile. Seeing that made me feel at ease. Watching Stephen leave in defeat finally settled everything inside me. I never imagined someone as skilled as you would be forced to resign over something as petty as jealousy.
You're too kind.
Even back when we were in private contact, he had always spoken highly of my skills. I understood that, but hearing his praise still made me feel a little embarrassed.
Still, was it really okay for me to step in on the negotiation like that?
It had been Mr. Nelson's suggestion, but I couldn't help feeling a little guilty. He had made it clear that I could decline the offer. But I knew that without access to the AI chips, Axis Logic would be in trouble. Technically, I wasn't even an official employee yet. I'd only left Alto Networks the day before. The reason I was at Axis Logic now was to complete the onboarding process. After resigning yesterday, I called Mr. Nelson and said I would accept the job offer. That's why I was at the company today for formal procedures. So technically, the negotiation had been handled by me before I was officially part of Axis Logic. That did make me feel a little uneasy, but Mr. Nelson wasn't concerned in the slightest. It's fine. Without you, the deal probably would have failed anyway. Stephen likely didn't have any proper materials prepared, did he?
Well, I'd already told him that I shredded the materials I originally prepared for the negotiation. Besides, seeing you here probably made Stephen reflect a little. That might be true.
Mr. Nelson gave a quiet smile. His expression made me smile too. He was glad to have recruited me. But more than that, I could sense he truly believed Stephen's actions were inexcusable.
Stephen probably doesn't understand how remarkable your sales work really is. That's flattering. Maybe a bit too much.
Not at all. Your honesty and dedication are what have led you to so many successful deals. The fact that your former boss couldn't see that is the real problem. The reason my sales results had always been strong was the trust I built over time with other companies. In a negotiation, earning the trust of the other company is essential. It's a simple principle, but the bigger the deal, the more important that trust becomes. Big contracts move enormous sums of money, and there's no room for mistakes. Also, since contracts tend to span long periods, whether the other party can be trusted becomes a critical consideration. In that sense, my approach, prioritizing trust, had naturally drawn the attention of many decision-makers. I always made sure my proposals were based on a deep understanding of the client's needs. I listened, identified their challenges, and responded accordingly. That mindset was likely seen as ideal in a salesperson. Steven tends to take a more aggressive approach. He rose through the ranks focusing solely on numbers, but that approach has cost him trust, and now his results are slipping. Aggression has its place in sales, so I don't necessarily think his methods were wrong. But over time, those actions wore away the trust of our partners.
That's why his performance declined.
Salespeople are often judged by their numbers. That leads many to chase deal volume over integrity. Mr. Nelson spoke with quiet conviction. It's something I had felt firsthand. But you chose the long game, building relationships and letting the numbers follow. That's rare in companies where everything is tracked and measured. That's why so many firms admire you, Mr. Nelson. Hearing it directly made me feel awkward. I scratched my cheek, a little flustered, but at the same time, I felt reassured that my approach had never been wrong. Earning trust might seem like a long way around, but in truth, it's the fastest path to results. In fact, it had earned me the responsibility of handling the Access Logic negotiation at Alto Networks. That's why I reached out to you and why I want you to thrive here with us. I'll be counting on you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
It made me genuinely happy to be so highly regarded by him, and I knew I had to live up to that trust. I felt a renewed sense of determination to contribute to this company's growth. And with that, the paperwork was completed, and I officially began working at Access Logic. Meanwhile, back at Alto Networks, losing the $7.8 billion deal had thrown the company into chaos. Mr. Kennedy was furious and confronted Steven. Thomas quit, and now the deal is lost. What is going on here, Steven? Explain yourself. That's because I had only resigned yesterday. Steven had even instructed HR to keep it under wraps. So, Mr. Kennedy didn't realize I had resigned until the meeting was already over. When it came time to leave for Access Logic, I didn't show up. Instead, Steven returned from the meeting with a gloomy face. That's when Mr. Kennedy demanded answers and learned the truth. We assigned this deal to Thomas. Why did you take over the negotiation without telling anyone? And why did he resign? Steven was forced to explain everything from the beginning. That he believed he was better suited for the deal, so he took over. That he pressured Thomas into resigning. That all the documents were deleted and shredded. And that the meeting failed because somehow I was already with Access Logic. Naturally, Mr. Kennedy exploded with rage. Unbelievable. Every bit of this is outrageous. The board agreed Thomas would handle this. Who gave you the authority to override that? But no excuses. And so the full responsibility for the company's biggest failed negotiation fell on Steven. Given that he had deliberately forced me out, his dismissal was almost guaranteed. Of course, the matter didn't end there. One day, Mr. Kennedy came to Access Logic, bringing Steven with him. He said he wanted to offer an apology. Since Mr. Kennedy wasn't at fault, I agreed to meet with him. I'm terribly sorry we let things get so out of hand. You didn't deserve that. You have nothing to apologize for, Mr. Kennedy. But still, Mr. Kennedy turned to Steven, who remained silent beside him, and scolded him. Apologize? I'm truly sorry. The arrogant Steven, who once drove me out, was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, he had been thoroughly reprimanded by the board. After the apology, Mr. Kennedy hesitantly asked, "So, you really have no intention of returning to us?" "No, I've decided to stay here." "I see. Then, I wish you all the best in your work here." He seemed disappointed, But perhaps he knew he no longer had a right to ask me to return. To my surprise, even Mr. Kennedy accepted my career move without much resistance. And then Stephen suddenly raised his voice. "It's all your fault this happened, Stephen. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened." His dismissal was all but guaranteed. He probably figured that since he was going to be let go anyway, he might as well say what he really thought. Is it fun looking down on someone who's hit rock bottom? Caught off guard by the sudden outburst, I frowned slightly. I understood the frustration and sense of inferiority Stephen was feeling, and I couldn't say I'd never face the same in the future. But still, there was something I had to make clear to him. You crossed the line. Sales is a world where results are laid bare. It's only natural to feel jealousy at times. I've experienced plenty of frustration myself when deals didn't go my way. But even so, there are things you can and cannot do. At the very least, you don't secretly change a lead negotiator or force a colleague to resign. Shut up. Don't lecture me. Unwilling to listen, Stephen barked back in anger. But then someone unexpected entered the meeting room. Seems a bit noisy in here. It was Mr. Nelson. Looking directly at Stephen, he said, "You're Stephen, correct? Do you understand what you've done?" He had told me he wanted to deal with this personally. Still, I was surprised to see him here because I hadn't expected it. He must have been quietly keeping an eye on the situation. He stole my success. If it weren't for him, I would have been in charge. Don't blame others. He was chosen because of everything he's built up over time. What? He clearly didn't expect even Mr. Nelson to scold him. Stunned, Stephen fell silent. Mr. Nelson continued. He's worked hard in a world driven by numbers while always prioritizing trust. That's why so many companies try to recruit him. Of course, he was chosen for this deal. Mr. Nelson continued speaking to the speechless Stephen. Sales isn't just about forcing numbers through. Sure, you might get a contract once, but the business world is small. You're bound to cross paths again. If someone remembers being strong-armed into a deal, of course that'll hurt future negotiations. Faced with Mr. Nelson's calm but firm explanation, Stephen couldn't say a word in response. Maybe some part of him knew it was all true. Blaming your own failures on him is unacceptable. You need to face your mistakes like an adult. Damn it! Whether from guilt or defeat, Stephen collapsed into a seat. For a while, he just sat there completely drained. Eventually, as if accepting that he couldn't recover from this, he quietly bowed and left. Stephen was officially dismissed for misconduct. Even with his former title as department head, it would be nearly impossible for a man in his 50s to find another job. But that's something he brought upon himself. He crossed a line that should never be crossed. With Stephen, who had long bullied others, finally gone, the employees at Alto Networks reportedly felt relieved. I was originally meant to be promoted to department head, but since I had left the company, a different trusted colleague took the position. With new leadership, the sales department began its fresh start and aim for further growth. As for Stephen, rumor has it he's now working night shifts on a construction crew. It was a far cry from his former role as department head. Perhaps the job will be the start of a new path for him. In the end, Alto Networks and Axis Logic signed the $7.8 billion deal. Despite everything, Axis Logic still wanted those AI chips, and Alto Networks still sought that historic contract. Their interests aligned, and if not for Stephen's sabotage, the deal likely would have gone smoothly from the start. I became the representative on the Axis Logic side. The new negotiator from Alto Networks was a familiar face from the sales team. Thanks to our mutual trust, the talks progressed without issue. After the deal was finalized, I heard Mr. Kennedy finally breathe a sigh of relief. During a break, Mr. Nelson said to me, "Quite the accomplishment for someone who just joined the company. I only had ties to my former workplace. That's all. Don't be so modest. You handled things diplomatically and kept a good relationship with your old company. That's thanks to your skill and character. I'm really glad we recruited you. I had no intention of returning to Alto Networks. Still, I'm sure I'll cross paths with them in future negotiations. As long as I keep prioritizing trust, I'm confident things will go well. Today proved that everything I built up through honesty and consistency wasn't in vain. And that's why I'll continue to value human connection and trust above all else.